Be the drop in the water that creates the ripple for the effect that you want to have.
Pirate Life Radio listeners, hello. Live and in your face, as much as it is in the podcast world. I mean, really, I guess that's kind of fake news. It's not actually live. It's live right now as I'm speaking, but it will not be live to your ears. At any rate, I really want to thank everybody that came out to Wadapalooza last week. It was fantastic. I meant to podcast out there, but goddamn, it got so, it's like it just became like an overwhelming endeavor from 5 a.m. until, I don't know, 9 or 10 at night. And it was just, there's no time to switch energies and do that. However, I really look forward to one of the podcasts I'm really looking forward to is Dr. Romanoff, who is the architect of pose running, which all the best runners in the world he's viewed, he's looked at, he's trained, and he is a font of information as far as movement study goes to best get the most efficient stride patterns, body placement, for ease and comfort and efficiency of running to increase power and aptitude towards that thing, which I'm super interested in because I am fucking horrible at running. Anyway, look forward to him. I think in February I'll be able to see him again. And I met him at the Caveman Coffee booth. He came up and goddamn, it's just fascinating. Once I put myself out in the world, I'm so resistant to get out of the house. I'm such a baby. And then when I get out there, my whole life is lifted. It's like I have the weight of the world if I'm by myself in isolation and I don't have intended, time-tested, like a structured implement, whether it's my meditation, prayer, writing. If I'm not directed and intent in what I'm doing and I'm alone, then all I have is maudlin despair. And I got to get the fuck out of the house. And man, when I do that, life sure does open up. Like my whole life becomes obvious to me of how to be helpful to those around me. So anyway, that's how I met Dr. Romanoff, and I'm super excited. I'm so glad that I went to Florida for Wadapalooza. Like, what an endeavor that is! If you don't know about it, you're just seeing the most phenomenal thing I saw there was the athletes that were missing a limb of some kind, and any kind of handicap that they'd had going in. You're seeing guys, you don't see the handicap. I mean, you're watching people do one-arm muscle-ups. You're watching people snatch with one leg. It's incredible. It's an incredible thing, and it's so close. It's such a close-knit family. I guess that's what I like about these little microcosms is that they're real familial, man. They're really based in cooperation, which seems like where we ought to be. That seems like the natural way of things, is to be in that. I guess not always. Not if you go in the comment section on the internet. Boy, I had a lady unfollow me today. Well, she didn't. She threatened to. I posted a thing that I thought was pretty humorous about Trump. It was a meme that just simply said, there's a picture of Jesus with a Make America Great Again hat on. It says, let he who hasn't raw dogged a porn star just after the birth of his 5th child and his 3rd wife cast the first stone. And some people didn't like that as much as others. However, I want to thank sponsors a little bit. I really want to thank Caveman Coffee. Wow, we've been like, things are things to come in Caveman I'm so excited about. So always, if you don't know about us, check us out, Caveman Coffee Co. on Instagram. And always great sales going on. Just follow the Instagram, and it comes up in the stories all the time, or suggestions on diet or how to prepare coffee or goals or inspiration. It's a few of us curate it, and it's rad. It's mostly, let me be honest, it's mostly Lacey Mackey, but there's a few of us in the mix there, man, and the feedback's wonderful. It's the only reason that we're doing this still. It's just such an amazing thing. It's not necessarily the thing you're doing, but how you're doing it and where you're doing it. Man, it's just beautiful to be a part of the community that Caveman's kind of pushed us to be more present in. And anyway, check them out, cavemancoffee.com. Also, if you live in Houston, Austin, Dallas, if you're up in Frisco, Texas, or in Chicago, run down and check out Concrete Cowboy. And if you are in Dallas or Houston, check out Clutch. And there's a new Clutch coming to Chicago too. So this brand is banging. And, John Val's and Dan Werk and Rico Taylor have been just grinding. And a lot of people, I mean, they would never even like it if I said that. There's dozens of people that make it work, hundreds really, and it's a fucking really well done, cool place. And Clutch is one of the best spots for food, drinks, people watching, whatever. Anyway, check them out, and you can follow them on all those different cities on Instagram and Twitter and find out what's happening. There's always great specials. They show the fights, football games, all that, and it's dope to be in a room full. I don't know, one of the best feelings in the world is being in a room full of Texans when the Dallas Cowboys are killing it and there's an exciting game going on. It's fucking awesome. I'm not a football fan until then. Rad. Anyway, check them out. As always, too, we would love it if you would go to our iTunes and go ahead and give us a rating. Those really help. I love putting these out here, but I would love to drive it to get out more and more, and it really helps us out a lot to be able to do it. And it's a little, between that and the positive emails, it's those things coupled with good conversation with people that I want to sit down that long with generally anyway, and I make time for it. And it's a really fucking nice implement into my life, just doing this practice of podcasting. So I want to thank you all for listening, and please, if you have a notion to help out, like us on all that stuff, share it. Oh shit, my guest is here. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about what it is to be a man in the world. We're going to talk about this new political climate and social climate we have. On the political side, it's okay to be as dastardly as you want to be. On the social side, if you're a little bit out of step at all, you lose your whole career. I kind of want to get into that because what a fascinating subject. But I got Josh Barnett here, you guys, which I'm super stoked to have. I've been a friend of his only really since he has taken on a new nickname, but I used to know him as the baby-faced assassin. And he had a signature throat slit that I just remember from Full Contact Fighter magazine's pictures of Josh Barnett back in the day, way before Warmaster. And he was just this young kid that was out smashing dudes out from Matt Hume's school, and it was a small world back then. Like MMA, like really Abu Dhabi Combat Club was one of the only sites you would go to get news back then. It was before even the Underground or anything like that. MMA.tv was happening. Anyway, Josh is on the podcast, and it was awesome just to get to talk to him for a little while. Hung out for a long time afterwards, and I look forward to talking more in a more distinct way. He's got so many interests, and he is very astute and educated in so many of those interests that I really want to pick just a couple of roads and educate myself more to be able to have a dialogue with him, because he is a fascinating dude. So I want to leave you with one thing. Kind of about acceptance, man. There's a self-leveling and an acceptance that has to happen simultaneously. A self-leveling of a real spotlight on flaws and character defects that we've got to be looking at ourselves in. I'm steadily in that. And then also coupled with that, which is some crummy stuff probably, I've got to have acceptance. And inside these paradoxes is where I've got to live. And I've got to find a balance in there. And that way I can progress, I can get better, and I can go forward. But this is a quote from a Jack Kornfield book. And what Jack writes is, even in terrible times, we must learn to love. And the following is a quote by Albert Camus. We all carry within us our places of exile, our crimes, our ravages. Our task is not to unleash them on the world. It is to transform them in ourselves and in others. With that, I leave you. I hope you guys are having a fantastic life, and please plug in and enjoy the ride. And it's Josh Barnett, and thanks so much for listening.
A big Tait Fletcher.
Powerful Tait Fletcher.
Is a real alpha male.
Weightlifter.
He's a stuntman.
Movie star.
Robust, enthusiastic individual.
He's huge, by the way. He's like a monster person.
One of the sweetest guys I know.
He's bigger than life.
Actor,
Entrepreneur.
fighter.
The jiu-jitsu technician.
He's also bald and he has all these tattoos. He's just a big fucking man.
A man, a myth, a legend.
Tait Fletcher.
Tait Fletcher.
Tait Fletcher.
What's up, Tait Fletcher, you bad motherfucker?
Tait Fletcher. Tait Fletcher is
Tait Fletcher.
Teddy bear motherfucking Fletcher, ladies and gentlemen.
That's Tait Fletcher, everybody.
The great Tait Fletcher. Tait the animal Fletcher. Tait the savage Fletcher. Always moving. There's no stillness with Tait Fletcher. You will find no dust.
Tait Fletcher's in the house, ladies and gentlemen. He just said the word erection.
Tait Fletcher.
Tait Fletcher's in the fucking house. Tait Fletcher!
Tait really blasts out some serious hardcore truth bombs, and I think you're really going to enjoy it.
And here, as I said, we're as live as we're going to be for you animals right now. But anyway, yeah, that whole idea of
Mastery, right? Okay, look, if you want to rewrite the manual, if you want to redefine, redesign, whatever, the process for something, that's fine. But if you don't have any idea what the base foundation of a process is first, even if you say, well, you know, my hypothesis is that it's going to turn out X way, let's say, and you go through it and it's like, oh, okay, my hypothesis was mostly right. That's fine. That is verifying what your hypothesis was, and number two, now it gives you a better understanding of how you should change such a thing. But yeah, and I'm not saying that there aren't going to be those Howard Rourke, for anybody that's ever read The Fountainhead, type people out there. But I think there's even a glossing over in Ayn Rand's writing about the fact that he had to learn at least what an architecture was and what an architect was, how architects designed buildings, why they designed them. Of course, there's a whole element of structural. The science behind the structure of building something, in that what is the holding matter, holding capabilities of the materials themselves,
what's a keystone, or what's
all that, right?
Things,
so
yeah.
I mean, there's the science, there's just the element of of the materials that I have, what are they capable? What are their limits, right?
If you will, yeah.
How can I use them? And then you go on to how do you design the best building or the most interesting? But there's still,
you got to take care of safety,
sure,
and longevity. You got to take care of all these things before you could get artful.
But even understated, Howard Rourke in The Fountainhead still understood what architects were. So in that aspect, that's how he was able to also be like, well, I eschew it, and I'm going to go my way, because every way was no way until someone did it, right?
Sure. It's kind of like when you grow up. I think you look at adults around you and you're like, I would go, a lot of that, as far as relationships go, not particularly nailing it. Mm-hmm. And so then you go, okay, maybe there's other ways to go about this thing, but like, until you really are like balls deep into a topic, whatever that is, to where you know all the ins and outs of it and all that, it's tough you can't really have an opinion, but you can have what passes for an opinion these days, which is a one-sided argument.
True.
But until you can argue both sides of it, you don't really have a really valid opinion.
Well, and people are really often anchored into not just, I guess you could say opinions, but you could also say that, their mental framework around where that opinion may fall within the entirety of that. And people are using these things as systems to determine how they should act, speak,
like
think.
ideologues.
Well, basically, yeah. People ultimately would much rather be told what to do than to have to be an absolute individual and do all the thinking and take the responsibility and load bearing for your ideas and your actions for yourself.
What do you think about the guys that are? There's this phenomenon that happens, and I just bring it up because I don't know if it was this morning or last night. I posted a hilarious meme of Jesus with a "Make America Great Again" hat on. And then it's like, let he who hasn't raw dogged a girl 5 years. Anyway, it goes. But then the instant thing, the rebuttal is always, Oh, and Hillary would have done a great job. Take the thing that is not there and to say you must be for that if you're against this. And
well, there's also an idea of straw manning the argument. So the argument isn't whether or not Trump is better than Hillary. The argument is about specific to Trump himself, and in this case, more of an argument of morals
and more and humorous. Also.
Yeah, well, it's a fucking door open, man.
Opportunity for a good laugh.
I got laughs coming. I got likes. I got all kinds of stuff. I'm just gonna poke around here. It's like I'm not fully married to it, but I like fucking with you.
Right.
Yeah, but well, of course, because that's projection from themselves. That's their own internal dialogue there. And fuck, man, I don't give a damn who raw dogs who.
Well, I feel like with that whole argument, like when Obama was in office, I feel like, man, he killed more people with drones than anybody, or you can look.
He is an infinitely better politician than Donald Trump in every way. Honestly,
and probably person. I'm going to go ahead and say I don't want to.
I don't know him,
But there's a guy that it looks like he'd be cool to hang out with, and another guy that looks like he wouldn't be cool to hang out with.
I've met Donald Trump a few times. Was very gracious and nice to me. And I had never, I don't have any enough hours of personal experience to give a whole breakdown on who he is as a person. But I've only seen him be nice to people in my person, be nice to me, be friendly to people around me, and so on. But if I was to look at and compare footage of both, man, you look at Obama, he seems like a cool as fuck dude. He has
Did you see his latest thing with Letterman?
Letterman
just got a new show.
I don't watch that kind of stuff.
He did an hour just dialogue, sitting in a chair, shooting the shit.
I bet he's great.
I bet he's great. It was fantastic. My point of it all is, I'm going to be critical of whoever sits in the seat.
As you should.
Because that motherfucker has some power, and so so my point being, when Obama was there, I was hypercritical of him. If Hillary was going, I would be really that would be scary to me, because it would be worse than Trump, because it would be a status quo, and nothing would get. At least now we get to see who the racists are. We get to see who the warts are.
Well, I'm all for that too. When people want to get into big time online and sometimes real life fist fights about free speech, right? It's like, it doesn't bother me to see asswipes with torches, the tiki torches, because if they're stating a position. Then if you can also get them to state a reason for their position, then you can go, okay, all right, then I will defeat your position with my argument. You gave me an argument to attack, and I can defeat it. And at the very least, it's like, oh, well, if you're a piece of shit, then you're, in my opinion, based on the views that you espouse and take, then I can see where you stand, who you are. And honestly, I have infinitely more respect for someone that stands up and says, this is who I am, whether I like it or I don't like it, than to try to slide around the issue, pretend to be something they're not, or to even just be a wishy-washy person, like a person that would claim to be something. Basically, fucking death to false metal all day long. I ain't about any of that kind of stuff. So be who you're going to be, and stand up for it, and then be able to defend what it is. And ultimately, let's say you're wrong. Being wrong is not the worst thing in the world. Being wrong only gives you the opportunity to be more correct.
Being wrong and not examining your position, that can be problematic for your future life. But I really feel like when I look into it and I go, well, they're wrong, but they've stated. I read a thing, but I think it was Seth Godin that talks about it, and he's like, be vehement about that position, be impassioned. It doesn't even matter if you're wrong. What's important is that you stand on it and you let people know, because then it allows them to make a position that's strong. You get to push evolution in that way. Even if your line in the sand is on the wrong side of things, you then create friction, and you need this friction for growth. And I thought, man, that's a fucking interesting idea.
Nietzsche always talks about that suffering is the catalyst that creates
the touchstone kind of
it's
for
the
any
thing
growth.
that creates growth. To me, it's like anyone that's always aiming for utopia. I'm like, that's anathema to human existence and progress. if anybody that's seen Wall-E,
You got to find joy in the suffering.
Well, yeah. Well, life is suffering. It is
Right.
always going to include some sort of suffering and setback and difficulty. I mean, and overcoming it is what builds character. What creates, carrying a burden and being somebody of responsibility and of somebody that can accept their role in life for its imperfections and for its glories. That's life affirming. That makes you ultimately a better person. That also makes it so that you are unafraid of going out there and putting yourself into positions to where you will seem foolish, you will be unknowing, are ignorant, you will be wrong, and that's also another thing to why I am highly encouraging of people to travel the world, to see
What
you
a panacea that is.
Yeah, it changes everything, and if you even have the opportunity to live abroad like I have, even better.
What's the longest? I mean, you started traveling
at 19 is when I first started seeing the world.
I remember seeing you in like NHB Fighter magazine or whatever. That was like it's like a shitty newspaper. It's like a Thrifty Nickel or like one of these.
I thought you were going to say in BDSM ads or something like that.
But it was I think a nickname that I think you hated. I don't know. We never talked about it.
No, I didn't hate it.
But you had such a young face. You're this little kid that's out there, and there's grown ass men that look grisly, like they've seen war.
I know.
And then you're. It was an amazing time.
I had very soft skin. I was radiant, I would
God
say.
Damn, beautiful.
But yeah, they nicknamed me the babyface assassin.
And that was Japan?
Yeah, I lived in Japan for 2 years from about 02 till 04. And up until that point, well, when I was 19, so 90, 96, 97, I hadn't really been to many places. I'd been to like Fargo, North Dakota, and I hadn't left the country yet. And the first time I left the country was to Abu Dhabi, and that was pretty interesting. And I got to go there twice. And then I went to Japan in 1999, and then...
Were you on your own, or did you have a coach with you for that?
Oh, no, I had Matt Hume by my side for...
the whole time you were in Japan?
Well, actually, by the time I hit Japan, I was kind of more... I was on my own more in that sense, and I was there to begin with training Bob Sapp,
right.
and I was training with... Tsuyoshi Kosaka, what's his face, Nakamura, the judoka who fought in the UFC for a little bit. I actually had to fight him at one point, and Yoshida, who I fought in Sengoku. Right. So and Yo Chonan,
Fujita,
all these guys, we would all train together at this place called Kosaka's gym called A Square. And then I started training at the UWF Snake Pit with Billy Robinson, and I would train with people like Enson Inoue and different stuff. And so I was putting in all my time when I could, and then I would come back to the US and I would train down at AMC, either in Kirkland, or a lot of time I spent down at AMC, what they were calling AMC South, which was in Auburn, at this big
Auburn, Washington.
Yeah, at this big. They had the thing there called the Super Mall, and there was a big. It may still be there. There was a fitness gym called Vision Quest, and they had a big amateur wrestling /
a great name
martial arts program.
If you haven't seen Vision Quest, you guys need to see that shit.
It's a fantastic movie. It is very.
If you're a competitor and you haven't seen Vision Quest, you're fucking up. Your game will improve at least 7 to 12%.
It's got a great soundtrack too. It does, man. There are times at the end of practice I'll play Lunatic Fringe and turn the lights down and make people shadow wrestle like it's for the world championship. So it works. It's verifiable. But this gym, this was where like Reese Andy, God, who else came through? A few other different, Bristol Murundi, all these different fighters were down there, and we were all working together. And it was just more convenient for me, since I was living down in the South End, to go train there and then just have training, sort of run the training, but then have them as training partners. But in any case, traveling the world was part of why I even bothered fighting in the first place. I mean, the idea of getting out there and locking it up with people. What was the first inkling
you had of it? I mean, as a young teenager.
Sophomore in high school, 94, 94, I think. Yeah. Watching UFC 2 on a videotape. And I had kind of heard a little bit about UFC 1, but didn't really, just sort of went in one ear and out the other. There wasn't something around to back it up. to bolster it in my head. And then I saw UFC 2. I'm like, oh yeah, I think I've heard about this. And when I saw it, it was an absolute life-changing experience. I just said to myself, I don't know how, I don't know when, but someday I'm going to do this. That was it. And then I've created the path, because there wasn't a path back then, and did anything I could think of.
Well, your awareness popped too for openings. Then you started to scan the scene for openings.
Well, that's the thing.
And go, oh, there's a Matt Hume guy, or there's a Maurice Smith, or there's a whatever.
And before I even knew that there was a Matt Hume and a Maurice Smith really all that much, or even how do you train with them, I'm at the University of Montana, and I'm like, well, I don't know where to train. I don't know. Most of these martial arts schools sound like crap in the city, so I don't know what to do.
A bunch of fake ass rappers out there that are slinging fucking the best shit in the world on their billboard or whatever.
Like, I don't. In my opinion, coming from being a high level wrestler and playing football and doing all and training some Thai boxing and Filipino arts and stuff. I'm like, to me, I just thought, well, these programs don't seem like any. I would be surprised if I couldn't take everybody in that school. And I went and then trained with the judo club at the University of Montana, and then proceeded to wrestle with both of the senseis and tap them out, take them down and tap them out. So I'm like, well, okay, I'll still keep coming around, and it's kind of fun, but I need somewhere to go. And so then I even made a flyer and started a Muay Thai club.
I can grit it out and beat you. You're not the teacher for me, man. Like, if I can just be tough and out tough, like, that's
well, it wasn't even so much about that. I would just grab their collars, and I had done judo as well, but I was no black belt. And I'd snap them around a little bit, move them, shoot a double, blast them onto their back, immediately pass their guards, and then just top wrist lock them, or what have you, put an Achilles lock on them, and they just couldn't stop me.
Right.
Like, it was within like a couple minutes or less.
And with the wrestler's mentality about space,
yes,
and knowing how to wear somebody out, it's like if somebody's not accustomed to weight and space on their body like that, they don't. That's a tough thing to navigate.
And I think some of it was that these guys were like, well, who is this guy? I'm kind of curious to see, what is he about? And then it's just, I was a meat grinder, man. If I could get my hands onto people, I would just go after them. And if you could beat me, all I would do is keep coming after you until I could figure that, all right, what are you doing? I want to learn from you then. If you can shut me down and show me elements.
Me.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense if you're smaller and weaker that you can finish my arm, so you're going to have to show me that.
And that's what I got when I met Matt Hume. But before meeting Matt, I had
How much older was Matt than you? 5 years or 8 years or something, I would think, or 10 years maybe?
See, probably 10 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And he, but I started a Muay Thai club. I had two people that showed up, one gal who I already knew, and then a guy who had done some, and that didn't really turn into much, but then I would just do everything. And then I ended up at Jim Harrison's Bushido-Kan Karate, which was a school that he was an old school Goju-Ryu karate guy and judo guy, but like beyond tough, like the kind of guy that all other old school martial artists are like, oh, you train with Harrison, okay, and you're for real, like bare knuckle karate dude, first U.S. light heavyweight kickboxing champion. He had an ad. I remember, I knew who his school was because he'd have ads in the paper. There was this one school that would put out an ad saying the best martial arts in Missoula, blah, 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 blah. And right next to that would be Jim Harrison's ad. If you think you have the best martial arts in Missoula, then why don't you come and prove it anytime you want to? Your top five versus our top five. And it was just a matter of, if you're going to call yourself the best, you better put it on the line, which of course none of them ever did. Right. And so I went and trained with Mr. Harrison, and we would bag drills, sparring, live goes. For a guy to get his green belt there, he had to do all these different.
What's a green belt equivalent of? In jiu-jitsu, like a blue belt or a purple belt?
Probably.
Okay.
For him to get that belt, he had to do all these different patterns for self-defense forms and all this stuff. He'd demonstrate certain kicks and punches and stuff. But then he had to do 3 rounds of judo and win 2 out of 3. And then he had to do 3 rounds of kickboxing and win 2 out of 3. And if you lost, like if you only won 1 out of 3 or none out of 3, you failed.
Yeah, nice story.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So that was
cool.
Me finding that path. And then eventually I fought on a AMC card, one of Matt Hume's cards, against one of their guys, one of their
called
pros.
AMC Pancration.
Yeah. And beat him in like 2 minutes. And so they said, oh, well, hey, would you come back in the summer and fight again? Like, yeah, I'd be down for that. And eventually I worked my way into being at that school and being at a professional fight school. But when I hear people nowadays complain, even any of the students that I work with at UWF USA, if I hear these complaints of this like what should I do kind of stuff, especially when I know that they haven't thought it through, it's like, well, you know what? Think about it, dumbass. What do you want? What are you trying to accomplish? And how much have you actually taken a look at it and said, well, okay, where am I at? Where am I trying to get to? What possible steps are going to be needed in between there? Because there was no one giving me oversight.
No, I was just thinking as you're talking like that, how fucking nice that you have the breadth of experience that you do to be able to show somebody, because back then there was no path.
Right. I mean, there was no set, like, this is what you do.
There's not a lighthouse, like, oh, I can navigate my way. There wasn't that.
And there was no gear even. I mean, we made our own gloves. I mean, we didn't even, if the fight even had us wearing gloves.
Right.
So, it's just like, all right, cool. I remember when people started importing Vale Tudo shorts. I'm like, wow, okay, yeah. Oh man, $70. That's kind of heavy, but that's what you fight in. So I guess you better get some or something like it. And nowadays, you can go to any sporting goods store, buy all the gear you need. There's martial arts schools. I must have driven past
standardized gloves. There weren't standard gloves.
I must have driven past like 4 martial arts schools
on the way here.
A few of them did with MMA or Muay Thai or something. Some sort of full contact.
Well, now more and more I go by them, and you're like, there's their names too. I mean, Verdum's place is down here, so I can eat those up here. Like, you've got all these different spaces that are all around, and it's like, it's not just like a bunch of bullshit like, oh, there's another Krav Maga place that adopted this and that, but it's like there's actual, like, these are schools where guys are great that come out of.
Yeah, and it's but the thing that I look at is that in the grand scheme of things, there's plenty, there's all this opportunity for anyone to be let's say a mixed martial artist. It all exists. There are, regardless, I mean, there are tons of articles, there's tons of this that could point you in the right direction and give you framework. And there's YouTube, and there's all these schools. You can go and look up schools anywhere. You can go probably do free trials at every single one of them and see how it works out for you. You can look up whether they have fighters or not and see their performances and all of this kind of stuff. And then go buy all the gear that you possibly need.
What's the advice that you give to somebody if they say, hey, Josh, man, I'm just looking, I'd like to be a fighter too. Like, where should I go? What do I get into?
I don't really know what to tell most people like that. I go, look, man, if you want to be a fighter, do it because you love it, not for the money, because chances are you ain't making shit.
Sure.
You're not going to make any money at this.
Yeah.
Those that really can get to a point of being self-sustaining and successful are very rare.
Yeah,
that's why it is rare.
Those that say that, I go and get good at something. Are you already good at wrestling, kickboxing, or jiu-jitsu? Because any real school that you go to, if you go into a fight program of that school, if it's a good school, you'll probably get beaten out of the school if you're not good at something. But if you are good at something, then you'll be of value. The guy that's touching you kickboxing all the time, well, that guy's going to respect you on ground day. Mm-hmm. But if he doesn't, you're just going to get beat up a lot. You have to bring a skill to the party, right?
Bag. Well, and the thing is, when someone asks me that question, my initial thoughts are usually they haven't actually considered it. They want someone to tell them where to go.
Considered it. Yeah.
They're if you're asking me such a rudimentary question, then it doesn't. You just want me to tell you what to do.
Right.
You haven't
and
sat down.
You're not going to do it anyway.
That guy or girl or what have you isn't that serious.
People send me shit online. They're like, hey, dude, how do I get into the movies? And I go, well, where do you live? I live in Greenwich, Connecticut or whatever. Mm-hmm. You should move somewhere where they make movies. That's the first thing I say. Like, if you're not willing to do and nobody's willing to do that. Like, if you're not willing to do the first thing, all their excuses, I've got a kid, or I've got this, or I've got that. Like, cool. I don't know then how to, it's like, there's these barriers and it's what barrier that I allow to stop me, I guess.
There's barriers and
thank God
there's always barriers, right? Well, that's the thing, right? Is that there is a exclusivity, or inclusivity is within exclusivity, right? So you don't just, I mean, my fight team isn't comprised of everyone.
Right.
It's comprised only of those that I think are worth spending the time on a ethical mindset, on a potential, on a physical capabilities, on a mental capabilities,
Right.
and on what skills they have. Well,
Team usefulness.
What potential do I see in them?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I have no time for you.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do for you.
I think it comes down to, do you know how to be a good training partner?
That too.
Because there's going to be, like, Chad's there with, or whatever. Are you going to be a good training partner to him? Or are you a hazard? Or are you going to be, do you have something that you can help my best guys with? Because then maybe you can get into that spot later, but you're not there right now.
Oh, yeah. And even with that, it's like, okay, there are people that may come and go and come to the gym to train some that are we're all on good terms. We're all friendly with each other. But it's like, you're not part of the team. You can come and train with us,
right.
and we're all down to be helpful and everything, but you aren't a part of this team.
Right.
So when it comes to stuff specific to this team, it is only for them.
Yeah.
It is about them.
And if you're asking me to make a choice between X and Y, like, that's not
Right.
even
Well, yeah, I know where my time is invested and why. And, I've seen that investment given back to me, and I've seen the reasons why I chose to do it that way. But it's just like,
Do you plan on fighting again?
yeah, I got some more to give. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of being in that mindset again to want to do it, because with everything else I've got going on, I'm enjoying doing a more regular life of sorts than I am
Right.
getting into fight camps and stuff like that. And the other thing is that when you get into those fight camps, the world
It gets
stops.
reductive.
It's just, that's it. That's
Yeah.
all there is. And so if you get, if I'm going out for rolls, if I get some sides and all this stuff, like, I ain't got time for this.
Right.
If they're like, oh, well, they need you to come and do this audition, like, sorry, that's during recovery, or that's during this, or that's like, man, I can't do
Even
it.
just dating or doing anything, it becomes, your life becomes reduced to that of a fighter, and it's an austere life.
Yes.
It's just what it is.
Which I've lived it that way for, pretty much 20 years, maybe
That's why
even
I
more
wonder
so
what-
going back into high school with sports.
As you hit the pressure valve and release some of the pressure that drives you into those camps, and you go, oh, it's nice just to enjoy a coffee or enjoy a slice of cheesecake,
or be at the comedy store at like midnight.
at midnight or 2 a.m. and watch. Yeah, Dave Chappelle went off for 4 hours, or what? All that, man, and so that's got to get increasingly more difficult to accept the pain of a fight camp.
Yeah, there is definitely some of that, but being in the room and when I've got the opportunity to get in there and move around with high level training partners,
Right.
and I feel like, all right, yeah, there's still a part of me that really enjoys this, and I know that I have more to give, and I don't want to leave anything on the shelf, because once you're done being an athlete, you're done. You don't get it back. You can't have it again. So I want to use it all up.
It's a weird thing, because then you go, as an athlete, you've never been a hobbyist. And so to go in as a hobby and play around with training now and then might not be even interesting to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like there's that's the difference, is that every hobbyist thinks like, oh, but like, if you've done the thing for a time and then you are away from that and you go, okay, now I've moved on, and does this have a place in my life? And then it's reorganizing all that and going, what is it I'm in love with? And it takes time to go back to going, this gives me something to my soul that gave me something before I was a fighter anyway, and I need that back. It's like that becomes the thing about, like, why do I want to have an interest in jiu-jitsu anymore? Like, what does that feed in me?
Well, there's definitely an element of fulfillment when you're going to take things to those levels. Like, it should be fulfilling to you in a meaningful way.
Must be.
But the other thing I think that comes to mind is the concept of, once let's say, once the curtain is pulled back, once you know what the difference between what the thing is versus what the wrapping on the box says it is, you can't go back. You can't unknow what you know. You can't now all of a sudden operate in a state of more ignorance when you have knowledge. It just, you know the difference, and so to do something less than that, less than what you know is needed, just makes you, you're lying to
It's
yourself.
like, oh, I'm mailing it in. You feel like a fraud, kind of, a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's just, there'll come to a point where obviously I won't be able to train at the level that is necessary to compete. But at that point, I'll also know that. I'll know the parameters of that time. I'll know the parameters of that training situation.
Right.
And so that will change things too. But
Where
right
would
now,
you go to train? Would you stay right here in Southern California?
Yeah. I'm not looking to take. Well, though, for a bunch of my camps, what I would do is I would spend time with this wrestling coach, Joel Sherritt, and he was the head coach of Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs.
Right.
Now he's the head coach of Navy. So I would go to the Air Force Academy and go train there for a couple of weeks. And now that he's at Navy, I've also been off to Annapolis and trained there.
Right.
So I would do stuff like that. And I think it's also good to...
Who would you have pieced together a game plan?
That would
you do that
be
yourself?
Somewhat. It would be that. My boxing coach, Jamal Mustafa, and it would be Eric Hammer, who's been my numero uno training partner for so long, and the guy just right by my side that he knows what's up, and he knows my skills and my strengths and my weaknesses.
Would you ever bring in a Matt Hume or a Greg Jackson type?
I mean,
like
I wouldn't mind
a strategist, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I always liked working with Matt, and so there's always the possibility of doing that sort of thing, but.
It'd just be hard to find somebody that has the experience and
Well, it's more about just like the oversight of picking up your patterns by watching you, and then say you need to make an adjustment here because it's just too obvious, or saying that under these circumstances you keep responding this way, but in fact it would be better to respond X. The
way the game has changed in the last 5 years, that must speak to how you would prepare. And what do you think the most glaring differences are between 5 years ago and today?
Well, everybody is far better athletes than they used to be, but the knock on that is that they've all became such better athletes, but they haven't become so much more technical. They got better at striking and defending things and being more athletic than their opponents potentially, and possibly even bigger and stronger with weight cutting, but they have no plan Bs. Most fighters don't have plan Bs, and sure as hell don't have Cs. And that's not just from cutting weight.
Meaning that if the game plan doesn't go to their liking,
most of these guys,
they have no default.
They don't have any other thing. Whatever their strategy is, that's the thing. And then if that doesn't work, they just do it harder. It's something I've noticed. And most guys tend to fall into a very similar paradigm when it comes to how they fight. And it's been more difficult for the grapplers as people have figured out how to shut down takedowns and how to get up off their back a lot easier. And it's harder to take someone down than it is to defend it, usually.
Right.
Plus, I think with 5 minutes, it's not enough time for these athletes to work. I think athletes of the level that we're at now need a 10-minute round or something like that, especially if you're a grappler.
Do you prefer pride rules in that way?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Especially,
I always liked it because I was like, dude, at the end, like if I've won 2 rounds and you're whooping my ass at the 3rd round, I know that I win that fight, but I shouldn't win that fight. Like, because if we're in the woods and I'm out of gas and it's the 3rd round, fucking you eat me. Like, that's what it is.
Exactly. You could give a great competitive performance for 2 rounds, but then in that 3rd, if you're just getting your shit pushed in the whole time and just getting lit up, then dude, you lost.
Yeah.
Dude, he had you.
Yeah, there's fights that I watch like that, and I'm like, I know they won, but I feel like they should have won.
Exactly.
And that happens a lot.
100%. Yes, it does. That, and also the fact that people using the 10-point must system are afraid to use a 10-10 round. It's like, well, man, nobody really established any real dominance. Nobody really did any real damage.
Right.
10-10.
Yeah.
It says one side must get 10. Well, the other side could get 10 too.
Right. Yeah, there's flaws. I mean, it's interesting the way. I mean, it's interesting in old school.
Well, we're going
Abu
to see it
Dhabi
tonight, right? Because
Yeah,
we've
dude.
got 2 big fight cards
What
on
do you
tonight.
think of
So
that?
I don't know. I haven't really paid that close attention. I think that Ngannou and Stipe will be a good fight. But I
Those
think
guys are scary. Do they scare you?
I don't have any fear of any man. I mean, what's the worst they could do to me? Kill me? I don't care.
How do you prepare if you're Stipe looking at that? You're a defending champ, and here's a guy that's a real gun that's coming in. It's not like there's a lot of dudes in the heavyweight division that probably he doesn't have to consider as strong as he does.
Well, Ngannou he's really big, heavy hitter, hard puncher. But Stipe's he's got to be smart with his hands, and he's got to use them. But don't try to hit the home run too quickly, because you'll run into Ngannou trying to do the same, right? And then now you're increasing the odds of you possibly getting clipped. And I would argue that Ngannou's probably a heavier hitter than Stipe, but Stipe's got this amateur wrestling background, and if he's got Ngannou off balance by being
and
really
he's from
concerned,
Ohio.
right? He is from Ohio,
which I think, man, that's almost like that's as good as black strength or Russian strength or farmer strength. I mean, that's like the old man strength of this country is Ohio. You know what I mean?
Enduring
really
Ohio
is.
for your life will make you strong as hell.
I mean, that's
you heard it here.
People aren't talking about that, but that's important.
Yeah, but if he can make him off balanced enough, even in having like a real threat of, oh my God, I might get taken down, that's going to throw off Ngannou's striking.
Who do you think is a favorite here?
I think Stipe's got to be the favorite. He's more well-rounded.
That's
He's got
kind of
more
what I
to
would
him.
think too, but it's not without caution that
puncher's
you would.
chance.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Ngannou's a big, heavy, strong puncher, and I think that he's dangerous on his feet, especially. But someone starts putting him on his back, let alone keeping him there. Curtis Blades was taking him down quite a bit. It's just Curtis's his pinning skills were just not quite there
it
at
can
that
become
time.
who outworks the other guy too. Because if I'm steadily making efforts to get up, you cannot hit me and mount an assault on the ground.
And Ngannou, I don't think has really gone the distance. So what kind of conditioning does he have? That doesn't mean he doesn't have it.
Yeah.
And the assumption is always that the big muscular guy is going to gas out. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't know, but it's something that you'd want. That if you're Stipe, it's like, well, let's see.
We're watching twin towers collide, is what I feel
Yeah.
like. Like they're both. I mean, it's exciting, man, and it's exciting the level that it's brought. We've never seen the heavyweight division so talented. Really, I mean, it's been we've had glimpses before, but it's like those have been guys that have still been there, like you, Andre Arlovski. It's like guys that have been in for 15 years are the guys that are the same talent that have been there for a long time. But now there's a new breed of talent that's coming out.
Here's the thing: these guys are very. They have talent. They have a high level of athleticism, but I feel like they're all falling in the same paradigm. So when you have someone that can fight outside of that sort of structured style of how do you approach a UFC fight,
right?
What are these guys going to do? What do they have to show?
Right.
I've fought some young up and coming guys before, and I've noticed if I could throw them into just a slightly different position than they're used to, that's it. They got nothing.
Right.
They're completely lacking. And so I think that the UFC heavyweight division is actually kind of it's definitely with talent, but I feel like it's really one-dimensional.
Well, look at like when Mark Hunt fought Lesnar.
Like I still think like if you look at Mark Hunt and Lesnar,
right? And you look at the half guard that nothing has happened. You're like, these guys both kind of, they're not as well versed as they ought to be in all these positions.
They're far more specialized, and although I'll give it to Lesnar, he did far better with dealing with getting hit than he had before. Because
I've never seen him.
He does not like getting hit
either. He was so wary and he was so careful with his takedowns.
Mm-hmm.
He really respected Hunt's, gangster, because
yes. Hunt is a heavy hitter.
That.
I managed to not get hit by Hunt, and I was so happy
I bet.
by it. But I think that if these guys are coming down to just a lot of slugfests more than anything else. But if a wrestler or someone with a good ground game can manage to change that up and keep taking people off their feet and threatening the ever-living hell out of them from on top, then I think,
we're seeing Chuck Liddell's game plan right now with these two guys in a huge way, and there'll be somebody that Chuck Liddell's them.
Sure, and I think the difference here, the difference maker, is for Stipe to use that wrestling base. I think Kane is at his most deadly when he's put single-legging people onto their back constantly, because it even makes his ability to strike that much better, because this person can't put all their resources into one area of defense.
Right.
They have to spread it amongst both.
And also, if you're Kane in that position, you feel way more confident because in your punching, if that's your secondary skill, you're like, oh shit, I'm owning him here. So I'm going to let loose a little, and then you flow better, then your striking gets better too. One success speaks to the next success.
If you're taking people down left and right, chances are you're probably dictating this fight.
But it happens in the opposite way too. As Kane gets injured, then he's trepidatious because of his injuries.
Yes.
And so then that mutes the fight in a whole different way, and now we don't ever see that original Kane again.
True
which
enough.
is uncomfortable. I remember when I first saw Kane fight, he fought one of those old school Militich guys. I forget who it was right now. Maybe Ben Rothwell. Somebody like that, like a great big heavy hitting savage from old school.
Yeah, just kept taking him down and hitting him and taking him down and hitting him.
He looked like a 55-pounder.
Yeah.
He was relentless in his... It was like Frankie Edgar in a 250-pound body. You're like, oh my God. Yeah, but that was maybe the last time we saw him fight like that.
He was fully dictating, although, his fights with Dos Santos, he, really let his hands go quite a lot.
Yeah.
Was very good at pressuring on the cage. Didn't see a lot of takedown work out of him, but there was some there. The last time he really threatened with his takedowns a lot, I can't remember. But then I'm also not the best to ask for it, not even for the aspect that I get hit in the head on a daily basis. But all that, and I don't always pay that close attention to fighting anymore.
I know.
It's like I've seen a few of these, so I'm not as really invested. And there is a good Bellator card going on tonight too at the Forum.
Who's fighting that?
Well,
is that
Rampage?
That's and Rory McDonald got ousted from the
so
headline.
Rory's fighting on that.
He's fighting for a belt.
I think he's fighting for a belt.
And then
against
last week
Alima.
they told him, you're not going to be the main card. You're not going to be the headliner, though. It's now these two guys.
Must be because he's Canadian.
Yeah, right.
But he's fighting for a belt against Lima. That should be a great fight. Mitrione, I think, is fighting Nelson.
Right.
And
Rampage fights
Chael Sonnen.
Chael.
It's
interesting.
I think Ilima McFarlane might be fighting on this card too.
I guess
that would also be for a title.
Rory had said that he wants to jump. He's like, I'd rather jump in the heavyweight division then. I'll jump in the tournament. Mm-hmm. To which Quentin was like, what's he going to do at 170 pounds if Roy Nelson lays on him? Like that, like, that's considerable. I remember seeing Roy Nelson. That's a guy with a gas tank, man.
Yeah.
God damn. I remember seeing him at Grappler's Quest back in the day, and he fought Diego Sanchez.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, that was the 220-pound Roy. Amazing. That was a different guy, yeah.
Amazing.
But yeah, well, he also, he wrestled Frank Mir at one of those in Vegas, I think it was. And Mir was all over him right off the bat. And then as his gas tank started to diminish, Roy just turned it up and just scored point after point after point after point on him. Yeah.
I remember when he just first started taking fights, and I was like, that's a scary guy. That's a considerable dude. And just off of seeing his tenacity with Diego, because Diego's a pit bull who never stops. Never bet against Diego. Just that guy would he'll find a way to win. He'll outwork guys. And that was always, and I watched him do that with a guy 100 pounds heavier than him, and I was like, man. And a black belt from Mark Lehman. There was, man, at that time, that was the top of the food chain type of jiu-jitsu, really. Like that guy, at that time, he was putting out champs like nobody's business. That he'd
very, very active in the American grappling scene of trying to develop the new era of talents.
There's only a handful of those guys, really, that were the top, like that we owe a thanks to. And I think like Eric Paulson is probably at the top of that in a lot of ways. Matt Hume as an American grappler, and then you go up to NorCal and see some of the boys up there that were strictly just American tough grapplers, man. And then Eddie Bravo, of course, and then Mark Lehman. Like those guys really brought and changed grappling in a huge way. Jake Shields was another huge man. Like the influx of wrestling that kind of went into no-gi grappling was a whole different
and because
immersion.
of MMA as well, all of a sudden a whole ton of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys all of a sudden started taking up wrestling and started training wrestling all the time. And guys in Abu Dhabi.
Remember when Goller went down?
Yeah, right. He went, they, back then, the Brazilian top team brought in a Greco-Roman wrestler to help. And so all of a sudden, all these Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu based guys are now all wrestling the whole time. Vitor Belfort had always wrestled everybody he competed against, even in Abu Dhabi. He's constantly wrestling. Leo Vieira, I watched him wrestle Shaolin in Abu Dhabi, and it looked like a freestyle match. They're just going after each other, shot after shot after shot, and reshot and reshot. And I asked him, I go, man, I come up to Vieira afterwards, I go, how long have you been wrestling? He goes, oh, I don't wrestle. I'm like, well, turns out you do.
Right.
Most people don't shoot doubles and singles and stuff like that. I know Shaolin used to wrestle for the Brazilian team, but it's just to see that, and why shouldn't it? You know what I mean? There's no one way to do anything.
Well, I think it accesses a different part of the mind. The wrestling is jiu-jitsu is such a technical aspect, and you can stall out if you're good and you know a little bit about, like, I believe like the 10th planet system is kind of like Greco-Roman jiu-jitsu in a way. It's like holds. I'm looking for the body for holds. I'm looking how to stick things and how to flow with things and stay close and tight to things without having a rope.
Which 10th planet style? Because if you look at 10th planet now, it doesn't resemble 10th planet 10 years ago at all. It's nothing alike. And I do remember Eddie being not that big of a fan of leg locks and saying, you lose position or this or that and that. And now 10th planet is almost entirely leg locks.
Yeah, and that's like
some of the guys still work a rubber guard system. There is always the basics.
Up in the Northwest, like Orchard is nail. I mean, he kills people, and if you get into his guard, you're in a lot of trouble.
But you see a lot of abandonment of even rubber guard stuff to just like to go work after heel hooks now.
Sure.
So although
I think that became like a freebie. It was like back in the day when I'd started. Wrestlers would adopt the straight Achilles lock because they sucked at passing the guard. They were so horrible at doing anything else that as soon as the legs went open, they're falling back for an ankle lock.
Yeah.
And that's what. And right now, I think that's what's happening is people don't know how to defend a heel hook
country,
very well.
And the heel hook is the easiest leg lock to get of all of them. It's the one that requires the least amount of power, I would say, and it's the one that is most easily. The one that can do the most damage. So it is. It only makes sense that would be the one that most people are going to gravitate towards. But it's just interesting to see, and all things go through adaptation. But then when you look at the landscape of how these people are competing and what all the styles you see and all the different philosophies on the mats, and often you see extremes. All the time. You'll see one thing like the X guard. Marcelo started being successful with it. People saw it, and then everything started turning one direction. And then other aspects were left behind.
That's
and then you'll see
jiu-jitsu guys are nerds. That is true. It's because they fetishize things, and they're like, "What's the newest?" I've seen so many guys go, "Hey, dude, look at my new finish," and to get to that finish, they have to intentionally pass up 3 other finishes on the way there. It's like, no, this ends here. You never get there. But people want to name a move so much that they're orchestrating, they're choreographing. It's as if they're doing it for a movie. And I'm like, no, you're just ridiculous.
Well,
you're
there is a bit of that. There's definitely some of that.
And then you go through a ton of that, and you see, 3% of this shit is bulletproof, badass shit. You know what I mean? And what I was saying about the wrestling, like, Casey that runs 10th Planet in Las Vegas now, he was talking about his daughter and talking about how her jiu-jitsu went through the roof after she started wrestling, because wrestling teaches tenacity. It teaches driven, I will not be pushed aside. I'm going to assert my will. And jiu-jitsu can be lazy.
Well, there's also it's far more strict about making your weight classes, competing on time, hitting competitions constantly and consistently, and having to even earn your spot. And
you fight against your team to get to fight.
And then you have to defend it.
Yep.
So other people will come up and be like, no, I want to be the 141 pounder. And it's like, well, you got to wrestle off.
And you retire it.
No.
You got to wrestle off every week, maybe.
Yeah.
And especially in the bigger categories like the 140. That's going to be
And
huge.
so it teaches you to be a different kind of competitor, right? Where a lot of the jiu-jitsu stuff is a bit more sort of laid back and laissez-faire in terms of its approach. And of course, at the highest level, these guys are athletes that make a living out of it. So they what you don't see is the difference. A guy like a Keenan Cornelius, when he's hitting probably his stride for his competition circuits, that he's likely already lined out in advance, knows where he's going to be, knows what he's aiming for,
knows
and
the 5 guys that are going to give him trouble.
And that dude, I know, is in the gym. He's got his weight program. He's got things scaled as to for when he was going to compete. More like a full on legitimate athlete. But then you see, Mr. Blue Belt or Mrs. Purple that just sort of whatever, and they see these people like, oh yeah, but you can't be that person without the sacrifice that they make.
Sure.
And it's okay if you don't want to.
But that's the difference
take it to
between
that
a
level.
Professional and a hobbyist.
Yes.
That we were talking about earlier. It's hard to go from being a professional to go back to being a hobbyist.
Well, and the other thing is it's like people
because
think
you have to lower your standards.
Yes, of course, 100%, and you have to face the truth that if you're going to be a hobbyist, you aren't going to be the professional level because you won't do what is needed.
And you're not the best guy in the room anymore.
And there's that possibility too. You might just literally not have the talent that someone else does. And maybe you could outwork them, to win 3 out of 10 times. But even to get to that point, the amount of effort and planning and amount of will it's going to take to make yourself do the things that are going to make you so utterly uncomfortable to get to that point. Right. Most people aren't willing to do it. And the other thing is, like, people think that, well, being a hobbyist means that you are that somehow is a knock against you. It's like, well, let's take perspective and go, well, if you're a hobbyist, fine. If you're not the best in the world, that's cool too. None of that matters until you start then pretending, or if you want to try and act as an authority, if you want to try to if you want to claim parity with somebody that is that is putting in the time, that is doing all the work, if you only then is there some sort of an issue.
Understand that what you are doing is different than what he is doing, right? Like, as the hobbyist, I got to look at Keenan and go, we both do jiu-jitsu. But he's doing a lot of shit that I don't. And to go, no, we're doing the same thing, and then he's just really good at it. It's like, no, be aware that he's paying attention to metrics that you never come into your life that just aren't there. And that's the thing, is like an awareness piece. Like, because without that, there's not a respect for the thing that the guy is doing. Because like you said, it's not the packaging, it's not under the lights, it's in the dark. Yes. When his mind is going and he would like a treat, or he would like to not wake up at 5, or he would like to 1,000 other things. He's got to do that stuff regardless of how he feels about it.
Well, and there is, I think, some implied lack of respect. Not necessarily, I don't mean directly at the individual, although that can be could be a potential situation. Yeah. But it's a lack of respect for the process and for what it is that makes that kind of an athlete at that level. To see someone even doing, let's say, rhythmic gymnastics, that's probably something that gets picked on or made fun of or what have you. And it's like, whoa. You might not like it, but if you knew what it took to get there,
sure.
It is literally not for everybody. Trust me.
Right.
It ain't.
I mean, you look at a ballerina and you look at dainty, slender, they look easily broken. But maybe the toughest people ever that go
Massively
ahead with
tough.
bloody toes, and like they go through an arduous training that I cannot comprehend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's the thing of the guy that does all the stuff that the professional does, and under the lights he falls apart. Yep. He'll never have his mental game together enough to ever be a display of a force that he is in the gym under the lights and the time constraints of his biological sweet spot to be able to put himself out there.
That is the biggest issue as a coach that you see. By far, people with tools, with potential, with physical gifts that do not have the mental aspects, I would say, to incorporate all of those perform.
Is it confidence?
I fucking wish I had the magic. If I had the key to unlocking this, I would be the richest guy, man. But it's an individual issue, so it's different for every single person.
Yeah.
Number two, it can be confidence. It can be overconfidence. It can be it can also even be an aspect of anxiety. Hell, it could be pathological. It's varied and greatly different between everybody.
Staying the course is
like
a thing too.
People asking me about how, before a fight, and I mean, I should say not just people, but the other athletes.
Right.
Well, before a fight, how do you feel? You get nervous? Like, no, I don't get nervous. I don't get nervous at all. I start getting really anxious and pumped up and start getting fired up and start feeling like someone's about to stick a key in the lock and take the chains off and let me go and let me be the person that I am. I feel like I'm about to be the most alive I am in my life.
Yeah.
And I look forward to it. And there have been times I'm in the back where I'm just hoping that this person hits me with everything they've ever had, with the greatest shot they've ever been able to accomplish, so that I can look at them and see their will crush. That's the place that I get to. It's weird and it's whatever, and it's
sure, everybody's got different stuff.
But it's for me, and I say, and they go, oh, I wish I could be like you, and I go, well, no, hold on.
You got your thing that's a gift.
Yes, so it's not about whether there is no exactly correct or incorrect way to approach this, and I would say this is what works best for me. The way I sit, my mind, the place that my mind goes to be at my best is not the same place as other people. And I've seen athletes that would get so nervous that they would throw up and freak out and cry and laugh, and they would run this giant emotional roller coaster, and yet go out there and boom, man, when those lights hit and they're out there, they're flawless, man. They hit and they execute and they win. And I've seen people who would get really just calm and quiet and reserved and what have you, and go out there and boom, explode. And then guys who are just like, yeah, man, I fucking got this, and then just crumble, just fall apart. It was almost as if they were trying to convince themselves of something instead of being honest with where they are and how they felt. And Ensign, in a way, would say he'd feel like, what did I do? Why did I sign up for this? This guy's gonna kill me. I'm gonna die. Right. This was the dumbest thing I could have done. And it was fearful. It was he would say to me how he was afraid of fighting, but that fear that he would feel about the whole thing was why he would go to the ring in the first place. Because he goes, if I sit here and I'm afraid and I'm a coward about this, then who am I? What am I doing? I'm letting something conquer me instead of me conquering it. And so he would go out there despite that. Or an old friend and student of mine, Charlie Pearson up in Washington, he said he would sign a contract and send it in and then think, what the fuck did I just do? That was so stupid. Why did I do that? And he would, at times, he told me there was a moment he was in an office, or he was somewhere at the fight location. He's like, if I just jumped out of the window, nobody could stop me, right? And that's it. I don't have to fight then. If I just jump out of the window. And that guy was I watched him spinning. I watched that guy spinning back kick a dude in the face as he took a shot of double on him. And I watched that Charlie attack people with such viciousness at times, and one, loved being in his corner for it, because that's really right up my alley. But there's something so commendable in hearing the stories of people that I know to be very brave, very forthright, very upstanding and strong individuals, to say that, essentially, and something that I fully and utterly inherit, weakness is a choice. Strength is a choice. And I don't mean strength and weakness as in being tough or not being tough, or how much you lift or how hard you punch. Those are very derivative ways to approach, to look at something like weakness and strength. And honestly, you don't have a choice in how you're born, right? You don't have a choice in what DNA decided how your muscles would be and how much of them you would have and how fast you could run and how high you could jump and all these kind of things, or how smart you are, or all these. This is, as Heidegger would say, this is facticity. This is just how you're born into the world, with things that you had no choice in the matter. That just this is, right? but you do have a choice in what you have. I mean, if you look at like Stephen Hawkins, he got Lou Gehrig's disease, and instead of falling apart, he continued to develop his mind. You know, he had no more physical capabilities for which he could push that envelope. He could push his mental envelope. And people being strong are people despite different. Or have you ever seen that guy that has like no arms and no legs, and there's videos of him like playing soccer with people and doing all this different stuff? And it's like, I mean, those are extreme cases, but
even early on in grapplers course, we'd see guys with one leg, or you know.
But that's making a choice to go out there and do, and even if they're not the best, it doesn't matter. We're not grading their success.
They're participants in the game.
It's not the litmus of success isn't based on, well, are they winning or are they losing or anything like that. It's a matter of them doing it despite the difficulties to keep you from it. Or even, let's say there's no barrier necessarily to speak of, but choosing to be less than you can be is choosing to be weak. It's choosing to be a weaker version of yourself. Right. It's deciding to not do work, to not put yourself into even slightly uncomfortable, or you know, in a territory that you're somewhat ignorant, to gain knowledge, to gain a better version of yourself.
Yeah. Keith always says there's always two choices with any adversity, and there's an easy way and there's a hard way. And always the only growth is through the hard way. It's always the right choice. It's like always, no matter what, to struggle, to dig into the struggle is always the right choice. And that's a huge, huge thing. Especially you speak of this thing in which is a real leveling way, in this world where everybody's looking for equanimity, and there's not any, but people want to pretend that there is.
There is no.
But you know, we're in a weird place where there's 19-year-old college students that are dictating social rhythms in a way, and they don't have any breadth of experience or understanding even of what struggle really is. True. Which we could verify just by the fact that they're in college.
Well, they would. There is an utmost amount of privilege, so to speak, by being able to afford or have scholarships or to be able to make it to school in the first place, or to even be in a country that would allow anybody to go to school, to say whatever they want to say, speak out against or for anything that they want to speak for. And
it's almost a denying of history.
It's a denying of a lot of things. To get to that point, you must deny a lot. Period. You have to turn a deaf ear and make yourself deliberately ignorant to a lot of different things to take on such myopic worldviews, and to also even refuse the idea that with some of these attempts at redirecting Western society, in that you are trying to become a tyrant. You are trying to dictate people's speech, thoughts, action, and you want to be the arbiter of all that.
I feel bullied, so I want to bully because I'll be a better bullier. I'll be the best.
Well, they don't. Some of these folks don't see it as bullying. They see it as being on the side of right, and so what they're doing is in line with what they think is the most moral and ethical thing to do. And it's like, you haven't fucking considered this one bit. For one, you know, it's like people will scream something about rights, and I'm like, do you even know what rights are? Where the idea of rights comes from, what inalienable rights, where that comes from. Do you even understand the political and philosophical concept of rights? And also at the
time when they wrote inalienable rights, that didn't apply to black people. It's like there's all those things that like there's
well, if technically in the documents it was written of, it does. However, if they made an exception, well, if you make an exception against what against something's intent, well, then you're degrading the foundation of your argument. So if you say all men are created equal, right, you know, then that means all.
Right.
You don't make it. There is no exceptions. If you say all, you can't say all. You can only say all, but there's no but there.
But that's the first skewing of definitions, right?
Yeah.
Of what a human is.
Welcome to humanity. And you know, we have been. If you go and you look throughout history, humans find ways to to set systems up for themselves at the potential detriment of
Sometimes
others.
without them even knowing that they're doing
Well,
that.
that's a major thing. Is there's a lot of people, I believe, that they believe that they're doing the right thing, even though they're doing an incredibly wrong thing. But I don't think that they mean they're not intentionally malicious. There's also people, even let's say from a business standpoint, I believe that there's plenty of people often within the corporate structure of America that would do something, or even within the political structure, that will do something to their own benefit to such a degree that it creates malintent for others, but they don't know that. Their intent isn't, I'm going to go out there and create this company and do this or do that. And by doing so, they're not thinking, well, I'm going to fuck over all these other people. They're just thinking, I'm going to get mine.
Sure.
And they want theirs to
Or
the point
they think
of,
I'm only doing this little thing. You're a part of such a huge construct, like a corporation or something, that you're just the guy that stamps it this way, and then that guy stamps it this way, and then that guy stamps it this way. But you didn't put anybody on a train to go to Auschwitz.
Right.
You were just part of this process, and you're just trying to feed your family. And it's like that kind of thing where we live with blinders on to a certain degree, to not see a big picture holistically of how we're maybe creating cancers in the world that we're not going to turn back from. I mean, the whole thing that I work, like, you know, that I have to always remind myself of is that I'm a work in progress, just as you are, or just as the guy that has the awareness of a 15-year-old has, or whatever. And you got to give people room to grow,
thinking
and that's
that
the
you
problem where we
absolutely
are.
know it is dangerous.
Super
thinking
dangerous.
That it's to allow yourself to not be open to the idea of correcting your position and
Right.
changing it is dangerous. And people that are ideologues, regardless of what that may be, you know, these people that prescribe to dogmas, they're inflexible. They're just as much inflexible as, you know, it was so hip to go after, you know, the Christian conservative who was, you know, buy the book, buy the Bible, the Bible, the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. Well, I mean, if you replace that with some other ideology, it's no different.
Sure.
Even though one may be rooted in the idea of, you know, what you would call mysticism and supernatural elements, this other one might not be. You might say that you could try to make a claim that it's this or it's that. You could even try to make a claim that it's science. But if you're creating a dogma, well, one, that's completely and utterly unscientific, because science means that you have a hypothesis, you have to prove that hypothesis, and then you must defend it until you either it stands on its own to be correct.
Prove it wrong.
Right. It has to be, people to try and prove it wrong is the whole point.
Right.
Because then if it can stand on its own,
and you should put it up and say, hey, please, my peers, please punch holes in this.
Yes.
And if there's holes to be punched, I need to know. Because that's a search of truth instead of an agenda, right? And so that, I think,
also
becomes
a search
deal.
of the idea of searching for some sort of objective truth. Now, you know, the speed of light is an objective thing, but you could say that, well, you could make an argument about this table. Well, I'm not really touching this table right now. Actually, right. I'm touching this table. And like, no, you're not. You're actually touching. There's a very, very thin layer of air and molecules in between this. And so you're really not actually making contact with it. And it's just like, okay, if you want to some degree, you also have to create this idea of operational objectivity. So it's like, yeah, I can admit that is all true. But then how do I try and describe feeling the ridges in the wood? Yeah, it's feeling how it's lifted up from one part of the table to the other, as if I am actually touching it. How if I have to break it down into this other,
but that's the problem.
We would a human being wouldn't be able to operate.
We get into this place where a guy told me one time. He says, "You know what your eyes for?" And I go, "To see." And he says, "No, your eyes are filters, so that you don't see so much. Because if you actually took in all the things that there are to see, you would go mad.
Yes.
You would go insane looking at the pore structure of everybody's face, or all the different colors that make your eyes blue, or whatever the thing is. You'd get lost in the insanity of the multitude of information.
Go out there and say that I see the sky as blue, and you would say, well, no, actually,
right.
What you're seeing is how this is reflected off of that. And it's like, okay, yeah, yes, you're right. But for me to operate in this world,
that's a
to be
social
able,
understanding that we have to accept each other's definitions.
well, having definitions and accepted definitions is how people communicate. If you cannot create accepted definitions, then it's a Tower of Babel, right? It's
so
all
that's
different.
why I'm scared. And what I'm scared of is when this whole thing, we're at like this weird tipping point. I watch the people like in Charleston, and you look at what happened there, and there was a term that was coined there when I think it was a lady that got run down by the guys that were, I think we could call them the white supremacists that were, right? Is that what you call them?
I'm pretty sure that.
And then the other term against them was called the Antifa. And the Antifa was kind of like they coined it as if you're a liberal snowflake type. Which I thought was interesting because liberal, I always had a problem with ever since I was in high school. I was like, why are they demonizing this word liberal? Like free, open-minded thinking.
But that's
like,
not.
Thought,
they created liberal.
Funny.
They've created liberal as liberal now has been transformed into this slur and like conservative. And the idea, if you say liberal, that means far left rhetoric. That means know, and then if you say conservative, that means far right rhetoric. It's like
there's this polarization that they started doing then with words.
Sure.
So words mean different things. So Antifa, which is anti-fascist,
right,
is now a slur. To say that I'm against, and also I think it's fucking hilarious that the same guys that are wearing the hats and carrying tiki torches, those same guys, they're self-ascribed Nazis, which they would.
I don't think they're self-described Nazis. I don't think any of them. Well,
carry
some of them maybe. Did some of them carry swastikas?
Yeah, they have and tattoos that they like to show off.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think that everybody in Charleston is a neo-Nazi. I think that there are some people whose skin in the game was basically just simply their skin in the game, and their the potential.
I'm telling you this: if you're walking around next to a guy with a tiki torch,
I don't support it.
You're that too.
I don't.
But the point is that the Nazi Party was a socialist party, which those same people would decry, which is hilarious.
Well, even if you removed the ethnocentric aspect of National Socialism, it's still a very tyrannical form of government. It is. It is a massive state system that is going to oppress people.
So that was a tipping point where more language is being subverted and altered. The next thing that I see happen is not, we got a guy that's going ahead and grab him by the pussy because I'm powerful, right? Like that's his doctrine, and whatever. Cool story. I'm sure that Kennedy was the same way. He was like, "Wow, this is rad." All of a sudden, I'm Motley Crue.
Well, I also think there's also like the validity of did he actually grab him by the pussy? Or is he full of shit? Is he just trying to act like? It seemed like he was trying to be a big guy.
I'm sure that if you run a beauty pageant, you've gotten a lot of blowjobs just from strangers that are super gorgeous.
I'm sure that people in positions of power are often going
Weinstein
to get.
Off. We haven't had a trial. However, there's a multitude of people that it would be hard to say that there's not accuracy there, where he violently raped people, like held them down and actually raped them, like in the term that we know as rape. And then we get Al Franken, who's just a nice pudgy politician guy, who I think was on Saturday Night Live or something, and then there's a couple of spoof photos, the way people do, like, he's not oppressing anybody, hurting anybody, this or that. And then why he has to step down from his post of politics is because he takes a picture with a fan and squeezes her on the side and said, "Thanks for the picture," like you would do with anybody.
I thought it was because he was doing these USO tours with another celebrity,
Leanne Tweeden.
Right, and there's like a photo, and then she said that he was inappropriate with her. And there was a photo of him with his hand on her boob or something.
She had a gauntlet on, like a leather, and he was like pretending didn't touch her, but it was like
this is.
But my point is this: that's not rape.
It isn't. That's true.
And they've been conflated.
I see.
So at a certain point, the moderate guy is going to say these things are non-rape, and he's going to make the Weinstein thing a non-rape too. It's making language more dangerous when you color with such a broad stroke.
If you degrade language, it is dangerous. Agreed. Like to say that racism isn't isn't discriminating against people before the color of their skin and their ethnicity, or believing in the supremacy of one race over another, but instead it's prejudice plus power equal. It's like, no, it's not. That's not what racism is. Straight up, you're of a different color or ethnicity than me, so I'm going to be prejudiced and
so
oppress you, or
class system than me,
or even just to say you're this and you're worse than me, or I'm going to treat you poorly because of it, or discriminate against you because that's what racism is.
That's an individual thing too that you're talking about, from individual to how I view you or whatever, right? But then there's also a structural societal racism.
If a society was created to be racist, so if you had apartheid or Jim Crow, that would be.
Or if you had something where you said there's inalienable rights for humans, but black people are property.
And that would be racist
and so
too.
you would say
but
that
that's
we're
also
structurally
specific
set
to,
up on that. And to say that we're not ingrained in that still, I think would be a fallacy, just by the numbers of, if you say the median paycheck, black people earn less than white people. On a national level, or per capita, there's more people of color that are locked up in prison than white people.
That's a deep discussion. That's a
pretty
very multivariate.
It's pretty faceted.
There's a lot of factors that go into a lot of different things there. I would, however, I would say that we while we do live in a majority Caucasian culture, having or I should say,
I don't know if
ethnicity.
that's true anymore.
I still think it's the case that there are that America or the U.S. is still majority.
I would say controlled by whites, but I think that we're over 50%.
I think population-wise,
Latino,
it's still
black.
Mostly, I think it's still mostly white.
Okay,
but my only point is not whether it is or it isn't. It could, whatever the case may be. I'm just saying that a majority ethnicity doesn't, and that isn't a cause for the potential negative influence against non-majority. Like, just by having a majority culture or a majority ethnicity,
but it
doesn't mean that it's going to be racist. But it is.
And I'll say this, because if I'm going to look up heroes, I'm going to find less that look like me if I'm black.
But what if you found the same percentage?
If I'm going to look at the money that I have, I don't see one black guy on that money. I don't see one woman. Like, these things, that means that nobody's even trying to shake off this old dogma that we live by structurally as a society. You think we
still live in the same paradigm? I would say that we don't live anywhere near the same paradigm.
Well, I would say that it's super subversive, but just that those numbers don't meet out. Go back to my prison analogy. In that, where you have such a high population of non-white that's incarcerated versus what the overall, that they don't meet out the ratio of, like, the free population.
Right, you're talking about. I mean, there are more white people in prison than black people, but by population, by percentage of population, correct?
It doesn't meet out. And
I would say the more
that means one of two things: that it's a racist society, or that you think that black people are less able to be able to be non-criminals, which both are racist ideas. If you wanted to frame the argument that way, that would be. Well, here's the thing: to say it's either A, it's because of racism, or B, it's because of racism. That's basically the argument there. Instead of saying, is it A, or is it give me another factor, give me another factor. I mean, so I'm saying that it's not as simple as just saying it's A or it's B, and A and B are actually not any different from each other. I think the most interesting stat to look into, one of the more important ones, is how the sentencing for similar offenses, amount of offenses, and then whether a black person is getting more time than a white person. I mean, I think that why is it that crack cocaine serves more sentence than powder cocaine? Because black cocaine's a black drug.
Possibly, or I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's
because that's an inner city drug.
Well, how did it become? That's a big one too. That's a leap down the hole, But
But we marginalize people. We do that as a society.
I think that,
And
human beings marginalize.
The game is loaded.
Human beings are constantly trying to marginalize each other on smaller extents to greater extents, based on the idea of, one, how does it benefit you? If we just stood around in a
that's the
circle.
problem with voting, right? Because I look at how it benefits me instead of how it benefits the country. And I call myself a patriot, like an asshole.
True.
You know what I mean? Like, fuck, man.
Well, and it's difficult to make a vote at all, knowing that your choices are so limited. It's very difficult. Knowing that and being like, well, man, I want to vote between. I have where I would like to vote, what I would like to see, but now I have to take this bad with this little bit of it good, or this, and then also, do I actually believe that any of these people that I vote for are truly going to do the thing that they say they are? Are you going to?
We hear a lot of double talk for sure.
Right.
I like Trump being president personally.
Well, it
makes me have hope.
It creates some chaos. It makes people perhaps more aware of what the political system is and what's going on with it. I imagine more people researched into what the Electoral College was the night after he came in. And these are things that Americans should know. If you're going to participate in the system, you should understand what these things are, so that then you can be the most effective.
Test. There should be a test. You should have some, just a basal understanding of things before you're allowed to vote. I don't think that everybody should get to vote.
Wow,
isn't that crazy?
That is a heavy statement.
I just don't believe it. We accept ignorance too much. We don't have a standard anymore. That's the problem with America, is we have loose standards.
We are constantly degrading our standards also, because people will say that if you don't make it so that everyone can.
It's because we don't cull the herd.
There are good arguments for that too. But
I'm not the guy to do it, though, because I would have been like, that Hawkins dude, he looks like he's having trouble. He's out. And then I would have maybe killed the smartest guy on the planet. You know what I mean? So I'm not the guy for that.
These are all very complex concepts. Ultimately, I think that if you can have a place that can allow people to be as free as they can without harming others, I think then you're pretty much on the right way, which means you're going to have to sit with stuff that you don't like, and you're going to have to hear stuff you don't like. And
I think that we got to have a base. What blows my mind the most is that there's not a base of, I would think, regardless of what you want to call yourself, and if you want to call yourself something, you're kind of a dickhead anyway. I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, I'm a this or that, whatever. But like at the base, we should say, well, we all have an interest in protecting our air, water, land, food sources. And it seems like we don't. It really seems like we're going more and more, like, why are we using coal still? Like all these things where we have more implementation and more ability to go towards a future solution.
Well, I think we're still stuck in coal,
don't do it
to some degree, because we have so much industry built around it.
For sure.
To end it,
and that industry can pay people to not have innovation.
Yeah. Well, as it sits, you have to find you would have to create a parallel industry that could also then employ the people from coal, ideally. And
that would naturally happen. I mean,
we should get away from coal for sure. And
people in the forestry industry,
we should be doing so much more for solar. I think is such it is so greatly untapped. I think there's so much more there that we should be doing with it.
We let technology lead us and pull us into the future in such a corrosive way, but not in any of the ways that would be helpful, that would counteract the corrosion, because the corrosion is money, is quick. Everybody's at a quick buck. When corporate endeavors become paramount to individual
I would say
endeavors.
There's that. Corrosion could be, money can be corrosive, but the other thing that's corrosive is comfort.
Sure, absolutely.
We have so much comfort that it's not.
There's comfort
people don't even think about. Okay,
don't get me wrong. I don't want to drive an electric car. I like having a car that fucking sounds like a goddamn dragon.
Yes.
I want that. I want that.
You're speaking
but if
to the guy.
we're going to have that, we got to have some solar energy. We can't just power all the shit.
Full on. We should have better public transportation. I don't
want to have driverless cars either.
I have no faith in that kind of thing being a safe endeavor. But what I'm saying is that with the idea of comfort is that people would rather be comfortable to such a degree that they would rather, and here's why I always am big on capitalism also is because with capitalism, I get to vote for the things that I want to matter every day by where I stick my dollars.
Absolutely.
And so it gives me a power that I don't even feel that I have in politics to affect change.
Feels more powerful than my vote.
Fuck yeah, 100%.
Right.
I put my money into the things that I support. You know, they went and took funding, reduced federal funding from Planned Parenthood, and yet the people got together and started putting the money into the things that they supported. And that to me was like, fuck yeah, you know, if the government doesn't want to pay for something, let's say, and you feel that it is as an absolute necessity, which I think Planned Parenthood is useful, absolutely, that, you know, you fund it, you put your money into it, you make it, you put some skin in the game, and you know, you pay for taxes for stuff, but you don't get to choose where those taxes go. But at least in this case, you get to directly put your money into the things that you support. And so if I don't like the way a company does business, I'll put my money into a company that does business the way that I think it should be. Now, that's not always an option, especially when it comes to things like utilities. But, you know, I can buy a phone that I think meets a better standard, or I could buy the water that I think is more useful or is more beneficial to wherever they're getting it from. I can make ecologically based choices. I can make, you know, choices based on social ethics.
Even
I can
where I live, everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could buy the coffee from the place that I think is best.
Yep.
And I think that that's a really important element that people maybe don't consider enough. And there is some discomfort and go, oh man, I'm going to have to pay more for something, or I'm going to have to go out of my way to go to this place instead of getting it from that place.
Right. What do you think about like this idea of tithing? Do you know much about the history of that?
You're talking about like with the church?
Like that you give 10% of your money to charity or whatever. It's like, and I guess it gets put into the church because the church is like, that's a great idea, give it to us.
Yeah.
But
that's where I heard it before.
Right. That was where I originally heard the concept, but I don't think that's the origin of the concept. I think the concept
Probably
is
not.
more of a ethereal kind of idea than that. But what I've found, I just say that because I went to a rehab center a long time ago, and I give money to them. And when I started giving money to them, when I've made enough money to give a few $100s to them, when because they send you stuff to say, hey, give money to somebody for a scholarship. And when I started doing that, that's when my life started. I started to not have to worry about my cell phone payment. You know what I mean? It's like I wasn't just check to check at that point, and that was a huge thing. And I'm like, how are these all connected? And I feel like there's these universal rhythms that are connected, that are kind of maybe spiritual laws. Like the dude first told me, he said, do you know the law of reciprocation? And I go, no. He goes, you understand what reciprocation is? I go, yeah, you give me something and I give you something back. Like it's like enlightened self-interest in a way. And you reciprocate kindness for kindness or whatever. And he says a lot of people look at it as, when I get mine, I'm going to give back, you know? And he says the law of reciprocation in the universe is that you give and then you're empty enough to receive. Like you've always got something to give. Always look to where you can be giving, Tait. And that was like an important lesson for me. Now I don't know if that's an absolute law, if that shows up for everybody everywhere, but there's like guidelines, like guideposts that seem like they've made an impact in my life.
Well, I would say that when you affect action, when you're doing things, depending on what that thing is, it will also put you often in proximity with others that are doing this, you know, like accept finds like. Yeah. And so it's not so much that you made it happen, it's just that you started naturally gravitating towards areas in which what you're doing is going to be reciprocated and what it is.
It's the Wayne Gretzky principle.
I guess so. But the thing is about giving is whether you want to tithe to your church or to whatever, or whether you want to give certain amounts to charity, be it Planned Parenthood or other options, or you know, anything, right? Or the United Way, or if you want to give money to something, if it's just like even when I was listening to something like yesterday, and they were talking about Bernie Sanders being on about millionaires. He had all these millionaires talking about how he thinks that these millionaires are saying they should be taxed more, and it's like they're like, well, you don't need to be taxed more. Just fucking go ahead, write a check to the government. Right. It's not like they're not going to take it.
Right.
Like, no, the only way you're going to pay them is if someone puts a gun in your face and
Right.
forces you to do it, or
I think Bernie's too old too.
Oh, he is too old, but he's just
Trump's too old. They're
I think
out of
that he got
touch.
to. I think that there was a point at which I was like, all right, I don't dig all of his policy, but I like the fact that he's going to get into money and politics. He's going to try and deal with college and how absolutely ridiculously expensive it is for higher education, and how the loan market has
There's
gotten
no reason
crazy
you should
around
have a
that.
$600 textbook.
All this other, yes, exactly, and things that I felt like, okay, and he's going to deal with things that I felt were, and readjust the budgets. And shift money into places that I felt would probably be better. But then it went, he's gotten a lot crazier from them. But I'm just like, well, he's a politician, so he's bound to be full of shit at some point, I guess.
I think also there's a thing about like when you almost touch greatness like he did, and then you've fallen back. It's kind of like you look like you're a Barnum and Bailey's like, come on, see the next show. Come on, check me out. Like
I think
like you've reduced.
I think
yourself
one of the
way.
biggest hits to him, honestly, one of the things that also made me be like, oh, are you fucking kidding me? Was when they fucked him. They straight up fucked him, and then he went and fucking backed him, the DNC, and I'm like, you know what?
You sold yourself out.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
If someone fucks me over, I'm gonna be like, you know what? Fuck you. You know what? Get on that stake and burn, motherfucker.
All he
I
can
am
say
not
at
for
that
you.
point is go, this system clearly is wrong.
Yes.
I'm not supporting anybody in this.
But in terms of being giving of your services, of your knowledge, of your love, of your kindness, and my opinion is that things should earn your
it's a
time, and they should
meritocracy.
earn. Well, and not just that. It's just that they should, like, why I'm not going to give all of my catch wrestling knowledge to someone that I don't think is an ethical a person that meets the
hurt somebody
ethics
with it or something.
or just not respect it, or you know what, it's just like that person doesn't meet the standards that I think a person should, then I'm also not going to give my money to somebody that I think potentially, like, well, I'm not going to.
What was the first thing that you saw when you had power in something and you go, oh fuck, I need to become a good steward of this thing?
I just remember, I was an outcast kid most of my life. I was
death metal your whole life?
Metal my whole life, D&D and anime and comic books and muscle cars and fighting and wrestling and all that, but loving pro wrestling and video games. But I was an outcast kid. I had my own struggles and my own difficulties growing up, and found myself being a very solitary dude. And it was through sports and athletics, and especially the mentorship that I got from others, and the camaraderie that I met with within those sports. It's like, because sports is such a meritocracy, you either earn it or you don't.
Sure.
Right? You either win or you don't. It's as simple as that. It really did a lot to shape who I am today, and it helped me grasp onto things that I kind of already had a gravitation towards. And then with the mentorship that comes with this sort of thing. And also, I mean, even the brotherhood, I'll go back to the brotherhood of it. Well, here's the thing. There's so much trust that gets created, and there's so much, everybody who's on that mat knows the same horror story and the same glory that you do, to a degree. And, you're out there sweating and bleeding and trusting and picking up those who are falling behind, and also elevating those who even think that they're doing as good as they could, and like, no, you could do better.
And acknowledging too that
for real.
You want to be who you are without these guys that maybe nobody ever knows their name, but you, the athlete under the lights, knows their worth and value. And like the kind of things that, the ebb and flow of the give of love, like it's like people. My mom used to ask me, she's like, God damn, you guys, the way you train and I said, well, you really got to love somebody to punch them in the face.
Massively personal.
You got to really love them.
You get in there and you start hitting each other, of all things. You start earning. It's such a very personal environment. Getting into combat with someone is personal, period. And when you're in there day in and day out, you will form bonds quickly and strong. And you also start to see the character of a person very quickly, because I like in Fight Club, the idea that you don't know who a person is, or you don't know who you are until you've been in a fight. Well, you can see exactly who a person is as soon as they get into a fight, because your persona is no longer something you can keep up, in a fight. There is no time time for that. There's no ability to put resources into being this mask of something. You have to be whatever it is you truly are. And you will see people show who their real aspect of themselves once you see them in a fight. I also believe that in bed you can see people for who they truly are at times too.
If they'll let themselves go.
Yeah, or you can see that they're absolutely putting on a shell.
You know what I always thought, man, about that? Yeah, for sure. You can see that too. Like the girls that want to pretend they're a porn star or something like that, or
just
whatever
any
it is.
variant. I mean, you can just tell when someone's being authentic and in that moment and not.
You know what I love about this is it all comes together with this meditation retreat I went to in Maui, and this guy Ram
You got into a
Das-
bunch of fist fights and had sex?
Ram Das has this thing where he says we're all just walking each other home, and like I feel like that's the truth in the gym when you're training with people. We're all just trying to get each other to the destination, man. And the same thing, like I was going to ask you, what was your first kiss like ever? Because in this society where we don't allow room for growth, we only allow room for judgment,
Sure,
or castigation, or whatever it is. The way first kisses usually go is like you go and you try to lean in for a kiss, and then if it's not received well, hey, what are you doing? And the hands go up, and it's like, and then that's the end of it. And you go, oh shit, I'm sorry, I was vibing wrong, and but not ever once is anybody's. Would it be okay? Would you allow me to kiss you in this moment? That's not what it is really. And
I don't think people even want that.
And there are check-ins that you should do, but also now the one is called a sexual aggression or an assault. Which is crazy, and it doesn't allow any room for anybody to grow in these lines where nobody knows how to behave.
Well,
really.
there's an argument that people are becoming less attuned to being able to read somebody's physical expressions.
Because of text and things like this?
Because we're not sitting down having conversations in front of each other, looking each other in the eye and reading physical cues instead of. And I don't think ultimately people want someone to have to ask every step. I mean, I'm sure that there are those that exist. There's always somebody on the ends of the bell curve, but I think that overall people want something like that to be like dancing. Okay,
yes.
Okay, we both got to this point.
Yeah.
We're dancing, whatever step it is. Now you got your basics, and then from that maybe you give a turn or a dip but when you're dancing, your partner will let you know whether or not they're willing to be dipped at this point or not. But you have to read that moment. You have to be in that.
Some people like choking, but if you're choking in the wrong instance, that is assault. Like there's things you ought to check in with. But
probably so. I would say that if you're just like, sneak up behind someone and lock a sleeper on them, that's probably not consent.
Right.
Yeah, probably not.
I feel like that whole thing is like, it's so much that in that idea of like, we're all just walking each other home. It's like the same thing in knowing the men and women are not equal, which we're fucking not, if you're curious about that.
I would say, it also really depends on how you define equal.
But I would say we all have 100% power.
Oh, yes.
Right? So
but that goes back to my whole claim on the difference between weakness and strength. And it's like, just because someone isn't able to beat me up, that doesn't make them not strong.
It doesn't mean they're not a great cellist.
It doesn't make...
Or they're not going to go ahead and be able to split an atom or whatever.
Or that they don't far exceed me in something else. I mean, it's not life is a competition, but in a lot of ways it isn't. Like, I'm not trying to compete with everybody I see in every... I think it's a
competition towards cooperation. When I have your best interest in my mind, my life gets better. And I think of that like in this male, female, like they're trying to polarize right now in a huge way.
Yes.
I feel like that's so huge. And if I could say anything to young men, it's like we're all just trying to walk each other home. And if in those endeavors now more than ever, you have to be aware of somebody else's vulnerability. And you have to caretake that to a certain degree.
For sure.
And I think that, especially with men and women, where women, it's not as easy. The orgasm with a woman is different than with a man.
Yes, it is.
That's a whole different thing.
It's a very mysterious, secretive thing, I swear.
So your whole job is to make a person comfortable if you're in interaction with them, regardless if that's walking down the street or if that's you're in bed with them. Like, wherever that is, it's like, I need to, when I see somebody extra vulnerable, take extra care to bring them up to comfort so that we can all elevate in that way. And if I'm not doing that, it's easy to not have the greatest light shown.
If you're not
that's possible.
genuinely in your interacting with people and allowing them to be who they are and taking a authentic interest in them without necessarily a bunch of expectations labeled on it, how are you able to read that person's an extra vulnerable person? How can you tell that person, maybe this one needs more hand-holding than this other one? How do you read that? I mean, how do you need to be able to fully engage with people? And it's like I was
see people as people.
Well, I was on a date with someone, and this is about expectations, and we're driving around, and she's like, "Well, I think that people ultimately they don't want others to be upset with them. They do things because they don't want to seem they don't want to make other people upset or do this or do that." And I said, "No, that's not why people do the things that they do. There's a whole it's different than that." And I said, "Look, I don't care what you think about me right now. All I'm going to do is be the person that I am, and all I care is that you are yourself to your utmost so that I can see who you are. And I don't have any expectations
how
to
hard
be here."
that is for people, right?
Well, to stand alone is a scary thing. Nietzsche would talk about how people were condemned to individuality and much more primitive years. What if you were different in the group, the tribe might kick you out and exile you, right? It's like, well, fuck, we don't want that screwy guy. But the thing is, to be an individual means that, for one, you have to learn to overcome being a herd animal and not...
You're allowed to be an individual in a team if you're bringing positive attributes to the team.
Well, if you don't sacrifice the team for your individuality, if you both on that team are trying to reach the same goal, if you sign up, if you come onto that team and you say, "I'm going to be a part of this with you guys because we need to get to or accomplish this thing."
We're trying to row the boat across the river, whatever.
Okay. So then if you start rowing the wrong direction, then...
Problem.
Right. But you're also breaking your word to them on what you said you would do. Right. And if you firmly believe that is no, we got to row this way,
right,
then you know what? You could try to make an impassioned plea to them.
If you want the shelter and the food and everything that the team allows you to have, the tribe allows you to have, then there are certain agreements within that about pulling your own weight, right? Now, that might be that you're the medicine guy, nobody ever gets sick.
Yeah.
You're selling insurance that if somebody gets sick, I'm the guy. You better be able to deliver at that time. Maybe not a lot is asked of you until then, but we're not going to carry you for nothing. Everybody has to, in austere
unless you're willing to go it your own way. If you're willing to do it all on your own, by yourself. I mean, and these are valid. These are valid examples, although extreme, right? So you go out, you know how to catch your own food, do your own preparation, know enough of your own medicine. I mean, you're just like, you know what, fuck you. I don't need any of you guys because I think that I should structure things this way. And then, possibly, let's just say you're not attempting to be a hermit. You just want to do it then maybe another person comes and says, I also think that this way is a good way to be. And then within that, then now you two are going to make an agreement, essentially. Whether,
you've started a new tribe.
Right. But there is an agreement. As soon as you start working with other people, it's like all of our relationships are basically agreements between each other. There are things to which I am not going to be offended by that you may be offended by, right? And depending on to how far apart those are, or how strongly my feelings and your feelings are, but that also alters things. But in general, if I want to have a relationship with you, I need to understand what it is that you accept, and if we were to make an agreement, what would be okay for you and okay for me. And so for us to have that friendship, I have to be willing to meet to your standards on things, and you have to be willing to meet to my standards, even though my standards, right. And on some of these things, my standards may be different from yours, but when it comes to being with you, we have to meet in the middle. We have to find a way to which it is agreeable for both of us and we are both happy. That's just you and me. That's me in a group. That's me on the broad sense of things.
And so we have to allow a lot.
Right. And you have to understand that there's an agreement.
Like if I love Lil Wayne and you love Deicide.
I do love Deicide.
It doesn't mean that we can't be friends.
Right.
Right? It's like this whole thing of like, hierarchy of needs. We
Right.
got to look towards our hierarchy of desires also, of like what we would like around us and how we make allowances.
Well, a lot of people I believe, don't look at it that way. They have a thing that they want, but they don't want to have to. They just want that thing, and they don't want to. It's what's necessary to have it. They don't want to put the time in. They don't want to. They don't want to have to concede anything. And it's like, well, then you're not going to get what you want the way you want it.
Towards the opposite of like Darwin's Origin of Species, and I think there's been a miscalculation of that book, of the meaning in a lot of ways, where people talk about competition, and it's fucking, the fittest, only the fittest, everybody else die, and it's like, it's kind of not that. It's like, it's more of a book about cooperation.
But with human beings,
it's about how we have to come together towards evolution.
Some of what Darwin's
because evolution
Origin
doesn't
of the
happen
Species,
individually.
You need stress to create evolution.
Yeah.
You need environmental stress to create a change, to enact a need for a change. Otherwise, there is no evolution. If there is no necessity for it,
there's no growth.
Also, I mean, Darwin's talking about this survival of the fittest, this competitive cycle that talks about the brutality of nature. The most unequal thing you'll ever find is the universe. There is no equality in the world, and actual equality, because the moss doesn't grow where it does because another plant lets it. It grows where it can. And so Nietzsche talks about the idea of will to power, and that this moss is going to grow and become greater and as big as it can get until something else, either the environment itself in terms of how much nutrients it's getting in that soil, or how much water in this spot, or what, as long as those requirements are met, it's just going to keep fucking growing. And then unless some grass grows up in another spot that outcompetes it and then keeps it funneled into one little area, and then a tree grows up and shades it off, and so then
but
I'm not getting
a blade of grass.
It's just like
it's all the grass. It's like, and that's the thing. It's the cooperation of this species.
But with us, we compete for all these different things, but at the same time, it's like, once being strong is not being able to just beat everybody out or oppress everybody or control everything. That's not what strength truly is. Strength is being able to be your person and be able to help others or defend or attack or do whatever. It's being able to be a thing that doesn't have to do anything at the deficit of someone else.
Sure, but
it exists on its own.
But it also, strength can also be oppression, rape, murder, unjust abuse. It can be all of those things too.
I would say
so
those are elements that can come from having strength.
Isn't strength just a tool?
No, strength. Well, yeah, strength is a tool that can allow you to do certain things. But I say if you start raping and doing all these different things, eventually that shit's going to get you.
Sure.
Because ain't nobody sitting around here going to let someone just run off and
the rest of the group will conspire to stop that.
Jordan Peterson tells this whole story about chimps, and if you're just the strongest tyrant chimp or whatever, you will be able to like beat them down and oppress them and do whatever, but eventually the other chimps will get together and they will fuck you up and kill you, and that's it. They're
can't, the strong sense of justice.
The only ones that will be able to be a long-lasting, live to their old age kind of leader is one that can be communable, can work with the community, that can cooperate, and as well as be powerful and potentially malevolent and things like that. It's strength is a quality, but how you use it is a whole different story. So if you use your strength, I could use my strength to walk down the street and just fuck people up left and right. Eventually, let's say there are no police, okay? That doesn't exist. But eventually, everyone's going to be like, holy fuck, we need to stop this.
Right.
So we're going to figure out a way, because this is all to our detriment.
Or the individual itself looks at himself and goes, this doesn't speak to the evolution of my soul in any way. There is no real lasting happiness in this. I have to find the keys to the kingdom in a different way.
Well, how deep could it be to just, on a further ethical argument and even philosophical, how gratifying could it be to beat up somebody that you know is not to your level, right? To beat up somebody that is technically
you say
weak.
that from where you are, dude, with as skilled as you are, there's a ton of guys that are just good bench pressers that go out to the bar and they look for a weak guy to punch
There
in the face
there
all the
are
time.
a myriad of individuals out here that are
and
grossly insecure.
Like Darwin was saying, turn on National Geographic or Animal Planet.
Yeah.
And that's a rape and murder story every day, all day long. Like everybody wants to talk about equality. Go ahead and turn on the Animal Planet.
What was it? Fuck, man, this guy lost way too soon. Mitch Hedberg.
Oh, God.
He has this fucking great joke. Let me pull it up real quick. I love Mitch Hedberg. This guy is so goddamn funny. Fish are always eating other fish. If fish could scream, the ocean would be loud as shit. You would not want to submerge your head. Nothing but fish going, fuck. I thought it looked like that rock. That is true. But, we have higher cognitive functions than animals. We are more capable of and animals can make choices too, and they do at times. They really do. But we have the conscious element, the ability to make better choices, to see what our actions do and how they affect others.
Sure. Starting
with your things in your immediacy, and then how the ripple from that moves out. And so I'm always trying to tell people, be the ripple in the water, right? So be the drop in the water that creates the ripple for the effect that you want to have. So if you really want to make change, especially, start with yourself. When that drop, which is you, hits that water and those ripples go out, what does it do?
Sure.
How does it affect
others?
How
does it impact others?
And, it's just like I do a lot of, my team is not just me building a bunch of athletes to make a bunch of money.
Sure.
It's mentoring. It is trying to help these kids along and help them be the best person that they could possibly be, as well as being a great athlete, and using that environment to try to create and temper better people. Because even if doing what I was doing or do for a living didn't fulfill me and if I felt like it didn't offer me ways to be a better person, then I don't think it would be a worthwhile endeavor.
Of course not. And I think that's the end play in all of it, is that where am I trying to go? And what does it take to get there? Just like you said, for an athlete asking you, like, what would I do? Like, the thing to look at is that we're always making ripples. Mm-hmm. The ripples are happening no matter what. And if you don't direct the ripples, they can have disadvantageous effects for you and others. And if you become aware and you heighten your awareness, you can see the dividends that are paid by making positive ripples for others. And that's where the real love is.
Well, and try to be a person that does it for the sake of doing the thing and not for what you think you're going to get for it.
Absolutely, man.
Because that's you're creating this expectation for getting something back out of it. And
when I show up just looking to be helpful, I get great results. Mm-hmm. When I show up looking for a certain result, my results are never that result. You know what I mean? So it's like there's a huge aspect in just letting go of it and just doing the work that's hugely advantageous.
100%. And it's not necessarily just about being selfless, but it is, I think, about when I like to use this example as a real world thing too. If you do something wrong, don't apologize to somebody so that you can be forgiven.
Sure.
That's not the
Correct
fucking
your behavior.
point. Apologize to them because you truly feel sorry for the thing that you did, and then whether they forgive you or whether they don't, you don't deserve that.
I wouldn't even say apologize. I would say correct it.
Well, there is a correcting, but if you know that you caused
that I'm wrong,
but of course, I mean the correction, but if you feel that you wronged somebody,
right, to
step up to them, look them in the face, and say, "I fucked up. This is on me." And I'm very sorry for it because I did this thing and it caused X harm or made you feel a certain way, and that was not my intent, or it was my intent and I realized that was the wrong way to, whatever the case may be. Owning up to it, and then that's it. You know what I mean? If that person all of a sudden goes, all right, well, I'm going to fuck you up right now. I go, all right, well, I guess that's the thing. Right. I'm not going to let you beat my ass, but okay, I see, I did the thing, I'm out of here, but I didn't mean it.
If I want to get set free, what my experience has been, if I step on your shoes and I scuff your white shoes and I say I'm sorry, is one level. if I get your shoes buffed or get you new shoes, if I correct the mistake, that's real freedom, man.
For real. That's being accountable to your actions. That's saying, I scuffed your shoe. Fuck. I'm really sorry.
I'm a fallible human. Can I
help you fix this? Can I make this right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's still not, and even still, if the end result is you say, hey, I did X, I'm sorry. Is there something I could do to fix it? Yeah. But even if you do end up fixing it in the end, but I would say that the reason you did it was because you were trying to get
save face or whatever,
something, then your intentions are still not quite where they need to be.
It's kind of like that idea about, I think if you,
the means don't always just justify the ends.
If you don't have any idea that dumping oil in the river is shitty, and you don't understand the impact that has, it's not the greatest sin. But if you know what that does and you knowingly do it, there's a different level of how fucked you are.
There is something when you know,
right?
yes,
right. It's
well,
like,
that's also why I've always
thing.
been like, I've seen some people sometimes try to say that men don't know, like young boys growing up don't know what rape is. And I'm like, no. I don't believe that for a second. I think everybody knows when they're doing something if you do something of that kind of malicious level, you fucking know it. I would say that it would be such a rare individual, and they would have to have some sort of psychological issue with them to not know what coercing or overpowering somebody or forcing somebody to do anything against their will would be right. You know what I mean? It's like,
but then
even with someone, okay, you would say even with let's say somebody walked outside and shot someone in the head, and cops was right there and they arrested him. It's like, okay, well, that's against their will, right? And I go, that person murdered another person. That's why this is happening. They weren't just, if anything, it's like the guy that went out there and shot the person in the head knew that by taking that person's life that they were doing something that was harmful, or to someone at least. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I think that like the whole, I mean, there's inequality, and there's.
Well, I guess it's also it really more stems to the idea that if a person was passed out and you had sex with them, it's like, no, nobody would think that a passed out person is someone you have sex with unless you were trying to be a piece of shit.
But unless you're just self-obsessed. Some people can't see past their own desires. Like we said earlier, that's how we vote.
But I think
we vote based on
I truly think that if you were to
so there's levels to this shit, is what I'm saying.
I really think that if someone was passed out fully and you went forward, you would know that you were, for one, that you were given no go ahead.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you have to know that you are.
However, there's countless women out there, I would say this is an easy example, that, I mean, have you ever felt obligated to go ahead and fuck a girl? Because you're like, shit, man, we made out, and maybe my hands are in her panties and she's really into it, but all of a sudden I'm just totally not into it. I'm turned off for whatever reason, but I'm already here and I don't want to feel like I've led somebody on. So you have obligatory sex with somebody?
Kind of.
I've done that.
Yeah,
I've done it more than once.
You know what? And
I've done it a bunch of times.
Although I would say, I would qualify that even in that, like, okay, maybe I wasn't
that person
super
can
into
feel
it.
That you're not into it?
Well, here's the thing. Once whatever got to that point, right? And then maybe it wasn't quite there, but the thing is, it's not pity and it's not, but at the same time, I don't know, I'm real sensitive to that kind of thing. And I really feel for people, if me and someone else are naked, I feel like we're on the same level here. Both one of us are both
not.
We're both, well, here's the thing. I feel like emotionally we're both in the same place, that both of us are vulnerable. You should be incredibly kind to people, and this, you should be very respectful. You should be more so than you would ever even normally think to be, because we're naked in front of each other.
Sure.
We're about to give of ourselves and be in a moment. So
you know how it's different when you walk up to a cage, and it's not every day it's not the same Josh Barnett that walks in the cage every
that's
single
true.
time, right? It's a different guy. Same thing when somebody's naked with you.
Oh, that's true.
You know what I mean?
I've
It's like,
become the greatest version of myself you have ever seen, ladies.
But then there's people that have flashbacks to their uncle fucking them.
Hey,
and all of a
man,
sudden they're
that's-
there. And so, like, what I say is you never can assume you're on the same.
Well, to what I can't know,
Right.
what am I supposed
So
to do?
then our job is to make people feel as comfortable as they can
You know
feel
what?
to a
Yeah.
certain point, because you are the dominant animal in that.
Yes, I
structure.
would say that, and for me, yes. But for somebody else, maybe
Nuanced times,
he's not.
my friend. Nuanced times.
Well, you know what? There are plenty of men that don't want to be dominant in that position, and that's fine for them.
Sure.
You know, but I am a very dominant. It's kind of my nature. Although, really oddly, I had been in a relationship for like 8 years before before that I was in one for like 4 years. So I had never really been single.
Right.
For a good portion of my life. And so I was like 28 or so, and I'd finally become single. And, as I started negotiating this whole landscape of singleness, I started to get a lot of women that were coming to me and really wanting a more forceful human being.
Absolutely.
And I'm just like, what? I
get that same demographic.
I don't have a sign. I'm not like.
Yeah, you do.
I'm not. It's a lot of assumption.
A dude in a strong American muscle car that pulls up in a death metal T-shirt and all in black. That's 260 pounds. That's a skilled athlete that kills people like at will. That has all this power at his fingertips. Yeah, that's a different kind of experience that a girl's looking for than when she sees John Mayer.
Okay, maybe. But that guy's got some really nimble fingers, so
It's true, man.
I imagine he's got some skills of
I
his
saw
own.
him at the Comedy Store the other night, and he's on stage. Chappelle brings him up. They're hanging out, and they were talking about this whole societal time of
Sure.
like what's going on, and somebody goes, yeah, I'm just out here trying to not get me too'd in the streets. And he goes, oh, that can't happen to me. He says, I don't rape bodies, I rape hearts. And like
Ridiculous.
Hilarious. But we're all using our powers to get the best result for what
everybody
we want,
has
right?
somewhere where they're strong. Something that they're strong. They're going to use it.
That's what I would say to finish up even, is to say that wherever those powers are, man, you got to be careful. We all got powers, and we just got to be careful how we use them, that we're not diminishing people with those powers.
For sure. And do your best to be, if someone wants to come to you and say, hey, this affects me in a negative way, hear them out. However, there are some people that could be absolutely full of shit.
Absolutely.
And there are people that are valid in
I
terms
think what
of
you
what
said, though, is so important. I've used this thing for 20 years now. If somebody says something to me that rubs me wrong, I go, okay, Tait, sit with it for 24 hours and look to where they're right. Mm-hmm. You've got to look to where the truth is in whatever characterization
don't automatically assume from either position. Don't automatically assume ill intent.
My automatic assumption is to be defensive. That's my go-to as a human. I go, well, fuck you. You do that too, or whatever my thing is.
Yeah.
And so I just go, okay, that doesn't help me get better at all. If my goal is to become a better, more evolved version of myself than I was yesterday, I have to take all the information because I got blind spots, and I've got to go and see to where they're right so that I can clear up those spots.
Yeah. And in general, strength is not strength because it's at the deficit of someone else.
You know what I love? I think it's Mark Bell that coined this: strength is never a weakness.
That sounds like something Smelly would
How
say.
good is that?
That's pretty good.
That, and my other favorite, I got a bodybuilding t-shirt. Fuck, man. But it says be the bigger person, which I think is awesome. I wish I could remember the goddamn name of the, anyway. Where can people find you, Josh?
At Josh L. Barnett on Twitter and Instagram, where I will post things having to do with science fiction, art, metal, fighting, pro wrestling. You can see me and Jim Ross every Friday night at 8 p.m. on New Japan Pro Wrestling, calling all the action on Access TV. We will also be doing live in Long Beach at the Pyramid in March. I forget which date that is, but probably head over to the Access TV website. I'm sure it'll be there, or New Japan World, or not NJPW1972.com. I think that's their website. Although that might all be in Japanese, so you'll have to forgive me. I'm also on the Facebook at the facebook.com/Josh Barnett. And you'll probably find me at a variety of metal shows.
Mostly metal.
Yeah, mostly. Almost entirely strictly metal. You'll find me at the dingiest dive bars.
I like it because I get little excerpts of a video from the it's like, oh, okay, I feel like I've gone to my share of death metal shows just following your Instagram.
Yeah, I try to be a real viewer, be a real viewpoint into death metal and
muscle cars and knives or broadswords
or flanged maces, coffee. We definitely have that in common.
Wicked.
Yeah, love. I mean, I'm from Seattle. My blood type is practically Colombian.
Caffeinated.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming.
I love being here.
We'll talk again. Peace, everybody.